Hello fellow collectors, I hope you're all doing wonderfully well. Today I continue my series where I talk about the best films I watched in the preceding month. After such a film heavy September, I actually took a little break for a week and a half or so and made a bit more of a conscious effort to watch less in October. I do sometimes find that I can get a bit of film fatigue after watching quite a lot, so a bit of time off always helps me to get over that, and to be ready to dive back into my watch list again. So for once it was actually a bit easier to choose the films for my October list, but also as it turns out it was just a month of shockingly consistent quality, so a real less is more month for me. But that's enough of my rambling, so let's get right into it and talk about the best films I watched in October. First up we have The Last Black Man in San Francisco. From 2019 and starring Jimmy Fails, Jonathan Majors, as well as a cameo / very small part from one of my favourite actresses, Thora Birch, but we'll get to her later on in the video. All directed by Joe Talbot. Now this one has been on the periphery of my interest for quite a while, as it's an A24 film, who are a company responsible for some excellent films in recent years that have a more independent vibe. I actually caught this one on iPlayer, though sadly it's already left about the time I'm uploading this video. The film touches on a few themes, but what I think came across for me was the idea of generational threads and keeping a connection with your past in the face of change. It was a powerful and moving story that, while undoubtedly San Francisco specific in many ways, actually had a lot in it that those of us who live in big cities can directly relate to, like gentrification, changing landscape and buildings, and community change. Alongside the ingredients of these larger themes is added dashes of family dynamics, racial identity, and following our passions. There are some twists and turns in this one. It has depth and warmth, and overall it was just a wonderful experience that I thoroughly enjoyed. And ever since I saw it, I've been eyeing up that A24 special edition on their website and thinking about what the possible cost of importing it might be. Next, and we have a very famous film directed by the inimitable Alfred Hitchcock, and that's Dial M for Murder. A film from 1954 starring Ray Milland and Grace Kelly, Robert Cummings, John Williams, as well as Anthony Dawson. Now when I put this one on, I had no recollection of ever having seen it, but as I was watching it, I think I've definitely caught at least parts of it on TV over the years, but it was wonderful to watch it from start to finish. It's a film adapted from a play, and despite the action taking place mostly in one apartment, it is amazingly immersive, and you barely notice how little you leave such a small space. Each performance here is absolutely stellar and draws you in completely. Milland in particular is magnetic and plays the light and the dark exquisitely well. It's also incredibly well written, and I really enjoyed one of the extras on the disc where Peter Bogdanovich explains how Hitchcock said, "You just shoot the play. You don't try to open it up, you don't try to make it cinematic, because what you're buying when you buy a play is you're buying the construction, and it's the construction that makes it a hit. If you change that, then you're ruining the thing you bought." Of course, Bogdanovich then goes on to explain what Alfred Hitchcock means by that, is you shoot the play like Alfred Hitchcock would shoot the play. I definitely found it hard to notice at first, but I think that a lot of space that's felt in this film is actually down to some fantastic camera work, which somehow adds space where there shouldn't be any. At no point does it feel claustrophobic, as I find a lot of plays adapted into films can suffer from. But this one was absolutely thrilling from the first moment to the very last. It keeps you on the very edge of your seat, and you just can't turn away. It's rocketed up to be easily one of my favourite Hitchcock films. Then we have Dinner in America, a film from 2020 starring Kyle Gallner and Emily Skeggs in the lead roles, as well as some smaller parts from Leah Thompson, Hannah Marks and Mary Lynn Ricecub, who I love to see in anything. All directed by Adam Ray Meyer. Now I came across this one a couple months ago in the Arrow summer sale, and as soon as I caught a glimpse of the artwork I knew that this was something for me. However, in a brave effort to try to curtail my spending at the time, I passed on it. But I couldn't pass it up a second time, particularly also because I wanted to have the edition with the gorgeous slipcover, so I grabbed it in Arrow's Shocktober sale. As I was putting it in my Blu-ray player, I just had the sense that this was going to be something special, and I actually put a post on my Instagram story saying as much, and I couldn't have been more spot on, because I absolutely adored this film. I'd go as far to say I think this has actually been my second favourite film that I've seen the entire year. This is certainly not something that everyone will enjoy, but my goodness, it was right up my street. It's anarchic, rebellious, savage and hilarious. It's a punk film, centering on our two protagonists played by Skeggs and Goldner, and follows them as their lives intersect and they get to know each other. The performances here were fantastic, and the music was also particularly excellent, which includes a song I've had on repeat since I watched it, which was actually written by Skeggs and the director Adam Raymeyer specifically for the film. This one was a wild ride that I cannot wait to revisit. It's one of those incredibly rare films that as soon as you finish it, you just want to put it on all over again and start from the beginning. Up next, and we have a rewatch for me, though it has been a few years since the last one. From 2001 and starring Thora Birch, Scarlett Johansson and Steve Buscemi, all directed by Terry Zwigoff, we have Ghost World, one of my absolute favourite films. Now, as soon as I'd seen Dinner in America, I started thinking of Ghost World, as there are more than a few shared themes and vibes, though they are very different films. But I felt like a double feature of these would work wonderfully well. I imported the lovely Criterion edition of the film back in June 2021 when some prices had miraculously dropped, and I jumped on the chance to get it. It was great to finally get to watch Criterion's release of it, and I really enjoyed some of the extras on the disc as well. Now, another of my favourite films is American Beauty, and in the early days of my exploring film a bit more deeply, I actually came across Ghost World and American Beauty independently of each other, and was amazed that Thora Birch happened to be in both of them. And I've always been sad to see that she hasn't had the career that I think she deserved following these two stunning films. I'm always delighted to see her in a role these days, and that's why even in a small part, it was great to see her in The Last Black Man in San Francisco. But anyway, back to Ghost World. In many ways, it's a coming-of-age film, but unlike any other that I've seen, it's almost an anti-coming-of-age film, I suppose. Again, we have a film that has some more anarchic themes of rebellion against the norm, a sort of apathetic middle finger to college, job, marriage, house and kids. There are certainly themes about trying to find your identity, but then also not really finding it yet. There's a lot of humour here as well, though some of it is quite dark, and some fantastic acting and characters. It's something that you just can't look away from, thoroughly engaging, and it just emanates an intriguing aura throughout. It's weird and wonderful, and it's a film that sticks with you after you've watched it, which is why it's been one of my favourites for such a long time. And despite this being a rewatch for me, I find that it hasn't lost any of its punch. And lastly, we have Licorice Pizza. From 2021 and directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, starring Alana Haim and Cooper Hoffman, as well as a smattering of some other top-tier actors like Sean Penn, Bradley Cooper and Tom Waits, and not to forget Mary Elizabeth Ellis, who many might know as the waitress from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Now, PTA, as most of us call him, isn't really one of my favourite directors, despite his clear calibre and status as one of the absolute greats working today. His films just don't always connect with me, so I wasn't sure whether this would be one that I loved, or one that I wouldn't really revisit after just the one watch. But I'm glad to say that I thought it was absolutely excellent. PTA has such a natural style of filmmaking. There's just something about the story, characters, cinematography and camera work that makes you feel like you're inside the film yourself, and Licorice Pizza was a top tier example of this. You're picked up and carried away in the story here, right from the get-go, and the story itself is fantastic. It has such immersive depth, and I think that PTA, who also wrote the film, has this ability to write something spectacular that really feels like real life. The story itself is set in the 70s and follows our two main protagonists, played by Haim and Hoffman, as they first meet and then as their relationship progresses and changes, and follows them during the twists and turns that they both experience. I wouldn't quite describe it as a slice of life, but more like a season of life. The film has this real sense of authenticity that runs throughout it, and it was a fantastic journey to take. And finally, we are on to my honourable mentions for October. The first is Alfred Hitchcock's Saboteur. Then The Darjeeling Limited, which I think is a very underrated film in Wes Anderson's filmography. The Guest, which came so close to being great, but I thought was massively let down with a fairly generic and somewhat disappointing final act. And lastly, Police Story, which was an enormously fun rewatch for me, and it was wonderful to see it in 4K. And that's everything from me and my October in film. I hope yours was also wonderful, and I hope that your November has been going great as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.